Hi, my name's Adam Page. I'm the Global Director of Research and Reports at Smithers, and I've been invited to give a presentation on the global trends affecting the printing market with a view and an outlook on Mexico and also the impact of COVID and other hot topics and trends that we're seeing impacting on the market. So a little bit about Smithers. We've been around for 80 years. We're formerly the Print Industry Research Association, and we have deep expertise and subject matter experts across print, paper, packaging, and food contact. We publish around 60 market reports every year on these different industries. We also are a conference producer. We do testing as well, and we provide strategic consultancy for clients who are looking to make big decisions in their markets. Today, I want to give you an overview on the outlook for print, looking ahead over the next 5 years. We segment the market by print product, print process. So I want to talk a bit about the trends in those markets. I have some data to share, some provisional data on the print market for Mexico. And then I want to look at and talk about the dynamics and the trends impacting on print, particularly with regard to COVID and the impact on how the market is changing over the next 5 years, and to give some insight as to how printers and print suppliers can prepare for this change. So overall, we see the print market segmenting into 3 broad categories. We look at publishing, graphics, and packaging and labels. We track this global print market every year, and we publish our data. Now, since the impact of the lockdown of COVID, we've seen a big change in terms of our forecasts for the global print market. So as you can see on this slide, we have data here from 2014, looking ahead to 2024, and we can see some big changes in terms of our forecasts for how these markets are going to develop over the forthcoming years. We can see that the publishing market is continuing its decline. We can see the same in graphics as well, but there is a bright spot in terms of packaging and labels. And whilst our growth forecasts have been reduced because of the impact of COVID, we see many more opportunities in some of these spaces, and I'm going to talk about those as we go through the presentation. We see a similar story when we look at the split by print process. So in this, analog print includes offset, flexo, gravure, and screen. We see a small decline in some of those markets, but particularly important is the growth of digital, and particularly inkjet printing over the next 5 years. I want to take a moment to look at the Mexican kind of printing market. This is some provisional data that we've been working on, and we'll continue to research and refine these figures. We have split the market into many different end-use categories. Some of the bigger ones we can see there are corrugated and solid fiber packaging. That's going to see some growth as we continue to see demand for packaging increase. Over time, we can also see the continued decline in markets like books, magazines, and newspapers. And when we look at the trends overall by print process, and here you can see we've split out the analog processes into the categories like litho, flexo, screen, and so on. We could see a similar overall picture where a number of the analog processes are seeing their markets decline or being taken by the digital markets, such as electrophotography and inkjet. So a big question that we are talking about with many companies in the print sector is, what is the impact of what's happening in the market at the moment? What is the impact of COVID on these markets? What's the impact of a potential recession or downturn in the market? What will the new normal look like? And what disruption or change will this have on the printing industry? It's clear that COVID is a global phenomenon that is having an impact across the board on pretty much every industry. We've seen the human impact. We've seen the economic impact in terms of trade and in terms of print specifically. Drupa being postponed was a big shock for suppliers to the market who were developing print machines for that important trade show. But it's also brought to the front a number of concerns around the supply chain, around globalization, and overall, when we talk to key players in the printing industry, and when we look at the data, we can see that COVID is accelerating a number of pre-existing trends. So yes, there is big disruption, and we're seeing years of change in just a few months. But a lot of these changes are from trends that we've seen for a long time. So if we look at the graphics and publication market, the negative impact of COVID is coming from trends that have been there for a long time. We've seen the decline of newspapers, the decline of magazines, and this has accelerated those negative trends that were there before. At the same time, whilst there have been some short-term blips, there are some opportunities that are emerging in some of the other markets, particularly around packaging and labels, where the need for food and for other goods has been accelerating because of the trends that we're seeing. Now, a really interesting data source, and I recommend everyone to kind of take a look at this, is the data published by Heidelberg in their Print Media Climate Report. They're looking at and assessing the overall impact of what is happening in the world on both commercial printers and on package and label printers. This is a global view. They started this in March. We're in week 36. And we can see there on a scale of 1 to 8, the potential impact and what print shops are talking about. We can see here how this is changing over time. And we can also drill down into different countries, and we can see Mexico scores 1.2, which is severe impact, which is probably not a surprise. And it is fluctuating around 1 and 2 for commercial print for Mexico. If we look globally at packaging and label printers on the same 1 to 8 scale, the outlook is better. So we can see that if we look at Mexico in particular and zoom in, the score is 6.7. So there is a minor impact. But it is not at the same level as the commercial printers. So again, if we look at weeks 36 to 37, the score is fluctuating between 6.5 and 6.7. Now that's really interesting because this chimes with the trends that we have been researching and that we have seen in the market. So this table here shows the Smithers view on the impact of COVID in particular, but a number of these long-term trends on publishing, graphics, and labels and packaging. And you can see from the traffic light score where the impact ranges from very negative, where we're seeing major falls in the market, to a small impact. And if we kind of go down in turn, we can see that newspapers, magazines, and directories are suffering badly. Magazines in particular are losing ad revenue. Directories have been in decline for a long time. And again, what is interesting about this is that it is an acceleration of those trends that we've seen and recorded in our data for a number of years. Some of the other products are not performing as badly. Photo books in particular have been broadly neutral. Now catalogues could potentially benefit from the shift to e-commerce, and we'll talk about that later in this presentation. If we look at the graphics sector across the board, if we start going down to advertising and security and commercial print, again, big falls, big drop-offs for a number of reasons. A lot of competition from digital formats, and again, COVID is definitely accelerating the trend towards digital. That is without any doubt. And again, having a potential impact on print where the digital product is in competition with print. And that's where it's interesting when it comes to packaging, and why packaging, I think packaging and labels haven't suffered as much. And that's because packaging is not something that can easily be shifted to a digital format for obvious reasons. Of course, people are shopping online and they're purchasing online, but the products are still being produced and shipped. And in some cases, through e-commerce, there is additional opportunity for printed packaging, and we'll come on to that later on in this presentation. Overall, the key trends in this post-COVID world fall into a few categories. We're seeing changes in consumer behavior, where demand for hygiene and safety is on the increase. There are changes in terms of shopping behavior, in terms of being more comfortable on buying online. That is accelerating, and that's having an impact, as we talked about. There's also more of a demand for sustainability, for green products. And again, that has a mixed impact in terms of print. And then if we look at the print customers, the buyers, the major brands, there are concerns around the supply chain and the robustness of the supply chain. And we've seen that particularly at the beginning of the lockdown in many countries, where there were shortages of products, where companies were struggling to source certain raw materials and certain ingredients. And this is making the major brands want to localize and simplify their supply chain. And then, of course, that is also chiming with the backlash to globalization generally. There's also an opportunity with smaller brands that are now able to market themselves directly to consumers through e-commerce channels, whether they are craft products, craft beers, specialist consumer brands. So again, these are looking for print and graphics and communications to distinguish themselves and to stand out from the crowd. So there are opportunities there for printers looking to get into new markets. I mentioned e-commerce. This is undoubtedly a big trend and a big shift in the world at the moment. There is a growing market for online shopping, and that is driven by increased connectivity in many countries around the world. E-commerce also requires additional packaging, some of which will be digitally printed. And e-commerce vendors are understanding the value and importance of engaging with consumers with good quality printed products, and the so-called unboxing experience, which adds value to the product itself. And so again, this is undoubtedly a driver and an opportunity for printers at the moment looking to grow business. If we look at some of the technology developments, there's a lot of talk about developments around inkjet in particular, improvements in cost, quality improvements. Now, there are, of course, improvements across a range of print processes. One of the factors that we have to take into account is the delay of a postponement of Drupa in 2020. Many print equipment companies and other suppliers were looking to showcase their new technologies and new developments. This undoubtedly has stalled the release of some of these innovations. But as I say, across the board, there are steady technology developments, particularly with regards to productivity and the technology itself becoming cheaper and more cost competitive. As part of our research, we look into and put together kind of technology maps for how this plays out. And it's as I say, it's interesting. Some of these new technologies that are developing. Again, thinking of direct to shape for moving into the kind of packaging space. Again, for printing on different substrates, and many printers are understanding the value and the profitable opportunities for printing on substrates other than paper, whether they are plastic or different board grades. But many of these new technology developments are opening up opportunities for printers to get into new markets. One of the things that we talk about when we are discussing opportunities with printers is how to think about getting into new markets, how to manage the risk that is out there, how to think about the disruption that is taking place, and what to do about this in order to position your company for success in the future. Now, there are many ways to think about the market. This slide is outlining some of those potential opportunities. And of course, completely new products and completely new markets are some of the highest risk areas to get into. But there are undoubtedly emerging and interesting and profitable opportunities in areas like textiles, industrial decoration, printed electronics, even going as far as 3D printing, biomedical printing. But at the same time, there's also opportunities across the board simply through expanding markets, whether it's web to print or looking at geographic expansion, or simply adding kind of additional value through finishing, mailing, data management, and finishing, and so on. So there's many ways for printers in this space to think about opportunities, to think about and to identify those markets that perhaps are in long-term decline. And now is the time to do something about it. It's clear that companies now are thinking about this disruption and thinking about what it means, and are looking for data to help them identify those potential sources for profitable growth and for opportunity. And whilst the overall picture might seem gloomy in certain segments, there continues to be additional opportunities if only they can be identified and then targeted through the application of the right technologies. So overall, in summary, there is a lot of disruption and there's a lot of uncertainty, and companies are taking this time to pause and to reflect and to decide what they want to do and how they want to position themselves. It's undoubtedly true that tomorrow won't be like it was before. It won't be like today, it won't be like last year. Consumer behaviors and the behaviors of print buyers and their preferences will permanently change. Customers are demanding a faster response, They want less cash tied up in their inventory, and they are very demanding. They demand more agile suppliers who are easy to deal with, because they want to get into new markets. They expect new business models, and they're looking for new products and services. So overall, there are opportunities for growth. An obvious opportunity is the continued growth of digital print in many applications, but digital print is not the only opportunity. There are opportunities across the board, and smart companies are looking at the data and reflecting, talking with customers and potential customers, and looking to see where the land lies and how to respond to this disruption with positivity and a proactive strategy, because they know that if they are purely reactive, or if they ignore the reality of what's happening, then things will be very, very tough for them. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. There are the contact details if you have any additional questions about Smithers and how we might be able to help. And we'll be delighted to take questions following this presentation. Thank you very much for listening.